Hello, everyone. My name is Graham Brookie, and I'm the Vice President of Technology Programs and Strategy, as well as the founding director of the Digital Forensic Research Lab here at the Atlantic Council. I'm excited to welcome all of you here for a conversation today with European Commission Vice-President Věra Jourová to discuss transatlantic and global information integrity, as well as media freedom in this critical global election year. I want to take a moment to underscore how grateful we are to all of you to join us here today, both online as well as in person. Here at the Atlantic Council, we work together to ensure that the same rights that we have offline are protected in online ecosystems. Today's event is brought to you by the Atlantic Council's Europe Center and its Transatlantic Digital Marketplace Initiative, as well as our collective tech programs, including the Digital Forensic Research Lab, the Democracy and Tech Initiative, the Cyberstatecraft Initiative, and the Geotech Center, which now that I'm saying that live is quite a mouthful. All of which account for about 70 experts spread out across 17 different countries focused on technology, democracy, and values, much like the portfolio of Vice President Jourová. I would be remiss if I did not thank our colleagues from across the European Union, of course in Brussels, as well as the EU mission here in Washington, D.C., to the EU's tech-focused office in San Francisco, for their ongoing partnership with the Atlantic Council and for this event today. Now, I think that the last time that we did a conversation like this was at the very beginning of the pandemic. It was a coffee talk over Zoom, and we talked a lot about the issues that we're going to talk about today. But a lot has happened since, including implementation of the EU Code of Practice on Disinformation, the passage and now implementation of 2 once-in-a-generation regulations in the European Union, including the Digital Services Act and the Digital Markets Act, and this year, the largest election year in a generation and for the next generation. A little bit of housekeeping before we kick off the event. Whether you're tuning in virtually or joining us here today, you can join the conversation by submitting questions to our virtual Q&A platform, askac.org. And of course, please share this event across all social media platforms wherever you're engaged. And with that, I'm honored to turn it over to Senator Amy Klobuchar for virtual remarks on the importance of the transatlantic relationship when it comes to securing elections, both in Europe and here in the United States, before we turn over to a moderated discussion. Thank you very much.
3, 2.
Hello to everyone attending today's discussion on AI and democracy. Thank you to the Atlantic Council for hosting this important event. With primary elections well underway in the U.S., not to mention elections in countries that hold almost half the world's population, it could not be more timely. We are living at a time in our country and our world when political rhetoric has become more and more divisive, when election workers face threats just for doing their jobs, when a tyrant in Russia thinks nothing of killing his political opponent. That's why defending democracy from emerging threats is my top priority as chair of the Senate Rules Committee with jurisdiction over federal elections. Like all of you, one threat I'm particularly focused on is AI. While AI has the potential to lead to incredible innovation, and we're going to see good uses of it, that's for sure, it also poses serious risks to our elections. Our laws need to keep up with this quickly evolving technology. We're already seeing AI being used to create viral content to deceive voters, like the fake robocallers using the president's voice to tell people not to vote in the New Hampshire primary. As you know, that's being investigated. We kind of know who did it because he kind of gave an interview. However, they're going to have to figure out what the penalties are here. Whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, no one wants to see fake ads or fake robocalls. That's why I lead bipartisan legislation with interesting group. Senator Hawley and I are in the leads. Also Coons, Collins, and many others to ban deceptive AI-generated content in our elections within the framework of the Constitution. That would be deepfakes. That would be ones where we saw a video recently where Elizabeth Warren, a fake Elizabeth Warren, was telling people that she didn't think Republicans should vote. It wasn't her. She didn't make that video. And we need to have very strong laws in place within the framework, which allows for satire, so that the platforms can say, no, you can't put this on our platforms. We also need disclaimers on political ads that use AI in other ways. I'm leading a bill with Senator Lisa Murkowski to make sure voters know if ads are made with this technology. Congresswoman Yvette Clarke is leading similar legislation in the House. And we need to make sure election officials are prepared to respond to the rise of AI. So that's why Senator Collins and I have a bill to make sure they get the information they need. Of course, we know AI-generated disinformation isn't just a problem in the US. We've seen it used to deceive voters in recent elections from Slovakia to Argentina, and the European Union is working to put guardrails in place, including transparency. Leaders in the US and across the Atlantic agree, with all that is facing us, we can't sit on the sidelines while AI continues to advance. I think you all know I've done a lot on tech. Some of the stuff people like, some they don't like. Just the fact that we have no federal privacy law. We have not updated our law on kids. Well, you know, we've got fentanyl and porn and revenge porn out on the internet. We don't have advanced competition laws now to deal with what we're seeing with tech. I know all this. No one knows it better than me. But this AI piece of it, let's not make the same mistake again. Let's get ahead of it, put some common sense rules of the road in place. Some will help to increase innovation and make sure America stays in the lead. But let's not stand on the sidelines while our elections get screwed up. And it's already hard enough to get the truth out there without looking at an ad and not knowing if it's really your candidate or if it's a fake, without really knowing if it's a candidate you don't like or if it's a fake. I'll keep working to find common ground, to put the rules of the road in place, but I need everyone's help to advocate. This is like a hair on fire moment. This is not let's wait 3 years and see how it goes moment. We have done a good job in protecting our elections from foreign interference through many administrations. We put the resources in and we've done it and they have been secure. We have done a good job of updating election equipment, of fighting against voter suppression, of making sure that we've got everything in place. And of course, I would prefer some federal laws on that, another day, another time to discuss it. But just letting this AI get away from us when it comes to democracy and many other ways is a serious, serious blow to our country. I'm in this fight because I really believe this is our moment to ensure that future generations around the world can take advantage of the benefits of AI while still preserving our system of government. Today's discussion shows that these challenges truly cross national borders, and it highlights the importance of working with our international partners, as we have done in the past when it comes to safe elections, to safeguard democracies around the globe. Our challenges to democracy right now are enormous, from the invasion of Ukraine and the barbarism of Vladimir Putin to what we are seeing across the globe. We have to stand up and we have to do it together. And one way we can do it uniquely together is by coordinating and working together on AI protections. Thank you, and just help out here and keep up the good work.
Well, welcome everyone to today's panel discussion. I'm Kat Zakreski, a national tech policy reporter with the Washington Post. We have much to discuss. As we just heard from Senator Klobuchar's remarks, there are many concerns this year about digital threats to elections. And obviously, the EU has its own elections coming up. So, Madam Vice President, wanted to ask you, how are you preparing for the threat of disinformation in this year's elections?
Thank you very much, first of all, to the Atlantic Council for hosting us today, and thank you all for coming and for your interest. Thank you for even using the right letters for my name. With the hook, it's a special day, I have to say. But serious question. Of course, this year is a super electoral year, and we have European elections, which are organized in 27 member states. It's not organized from one center. And we have 10 national elections and many regional and local ones. We identified already some time ago several new threats which need to be addressed, and we have to be prepared for them. We are more or less sure that they will appear. Cyber threats and cyber attacks. So we need our infrastructure to be safe and prepared. Second, foreign interference. And here, of course, in European Union, we speak about Kremlin, which is very successful in creating narratives which can influence the voting preferences of the people, and lying narratives, lies, disinformation, in order to influence the elections in the way that the people in Europe will say, stop to support for Ukraine. The goal is clear. Yeah? We see that from Russia there is a very clear plan. And the third thing is the appearance of disinformation in combination with AI. Or in other words, disinformation on steroids amplified by AI, where we as human beings have a very limited chance to defend ourselves. That's why we take measures against all these new threats.
And just because you just mentioned AI, I want to ask a little bit about that, because as Graham alluded to earlier, Europe is in the process of rolling out landmark social media laws. But in some ways in this tech policy debate, it often feels like we're racing to respond to the old threat as a new one is emerging. I mean, how are you thinking about AI, and how will you be able to apply the Digital Services Act to address that in this election cycle?
First of all, I want to recall what Senator Klobuchar just said, that we have to cooperate on smart solutions for AI to serve the people in the best possible way. We are convinced in the EU that AI can serve good purposes, but the condition is that it will not escape from the control of the human beings. That's why in the AI Act, which we adopted in November, we want to introduce a system when the very large capable models will be tested prior to be used in the market. We have a list of risky use cases where also we must see the testing prior to the usage of the technology. And we want a full transparency of where and how the AI is being used. And here comes the connection with the elections, because we want to achieve full transparency and full information for the voters. I will be very concrete. I, as the voter, I am watching my iPad or whatever, PC, and I see somebody speaking to me, some politician saying strange things. And so there should be the notification or label, this is the AI production. The second thing, in case I read the text which has the potential to influence my political preference, I should also see the notification, this is the political ad. So this is what we try to introduce through the legislation in the EU, that the people are informed, because we want the elections to be the competition of real people, visions, real ideas, and not just the competition of who can use more manipulative, more effective manipulative techniques. I also now send letters to the European political parties and political parties in our member states with a plea, could you please resist using these manipulative techniques? Let's agree on keeping the elections as the festival of democracy, where full transparency will be respected.
Well, and so you mentioned the EU AI Act, and that will not fully be in effect for a couple of years until after the elections. If politicians don't heed your letter, if they do use AI in this cycle in the coming months, will they face any consequences?
The politicians and the political parties will not face any consequences, because still the online political ads regulation will not be in force. Yeah? After it will come into force, then there will be an obligation for the political parties, when they send the ad to the digital space, to add the information that has been paid as the political ad. But what we want to see before the European elections, which is the beginning of June, is that the political parties will behave. I cannot say whether they will follow our advice or not. I will be very sad if not, because I think that if we have the ambition to govern in our member states, we should also show that we can live and win the elections without dirty methods. So it's one thing. The other thing is what we want from the digital platforms and the digital companies to guarantee that there will be this notification that this is AI production. In case of some deep fakes, which will really have a potential harmful impact on the society, on the security, or on fairness of the elections, then they committed to remove it. So here I speak about, I think, 11 biggest platforms which signed a commitment in Munich, and the commitment says we will either label or remove the deep fakes in the, which will appear during the pre-electoral or pre-election campaign, out of voluntary decision, because the AI Act, which requires this kind of transparency, is not and will not still be in force.
And on that point of requiring the tech platforms to disclose when something is AI generated, can you tell me a little bit about how they'll actually do that? Just because some of the technology today to identify when something is AI generated or not, it's still very early. There's a lot of complications with that technology. How can a Meta or X or TikTok be sure something is AI generated and append a label like that?
How I wish to give you a well-qualified answer of somebody who understands technologies. It's not my case. I understand the impact of technologies on the society to some extent. But when I came with this request to label the AI production, it was July last year, I received mixed answers from the big tech. Some said, I will not name, but some said, yes, we will work on it. It requires technological solution. In other words, to detect the AI production, it cannot be anymore the work for the human beings. So they were clear, we have to develop another AI machine to detect the production of AI. Some platforms told me this is impossible. This is possible for the texts, this is possible for the, I think, videos, but not for the images. There was mixed answer about the feasibility of such measure. But I told you already in February this year in Munich, I saw the very same platforms signing the so-called Munich Accord, where they committed to detect and to also do the cross detection of the AI production, because what I heard, for instance, from Meta, that for them it's possible to detect it when the AI appears within their system, but when it is produced somewhere else and comes from outside, it's not that easy. That's why it's so important that now the technological companies have this horizontal agreement, which helps them to detect the AI production in fact, immediately. And the speed is of essence. Because just imagine if such a deep fake, which could really have a strong influence on the results of the elections, just imagine if it appears 1 or 2 days before elections. We will need to see very, very speedy reaction.
Based on these companies' track records, do you trust them to comply with a voluntary agreement like the Munich Accord?
For many years, we worked with the method trust and check. Now we added trust and check and sanction, because we have the legislation already. And I have to say that what I see when I speak to the managers of big tech, they take very seriously the European method of regulating things and addressing the risks through regulation. So the Digital Services Act, which was mentioned here before, it's a very strong set of rules which require big capacities to be deployed by the big tech companies, but also smaller ones, because we cover all of them. So to deploy big capacities to, first of all, proactively work against the illegal content, which is not disinformation, but illegal content in the sense of hate speech, terrorist content, extremism, child pornography. Newly, we introduced the new criminal offense, which is digital online violence against women. This is fresh, now very new legislation. And so they know that they have to guarantee, and they are under the sanction, that they will not anymore distribute crime. I speak about illegal content. On disinformation, it's a different story because it can be punishable by the criminal laws in case of some disinformation which can start some violence in real life, which can work as a real security threat. But in most cases, disinformation is not illegal, but it can be harmful, and it requires some reaction in case, especially in case when it can influence the elections. One thing should be emphasized at this moment. Very often I hear in the United States that the European Union started to introduce the rules which will start some kind of censorship. So I want to make clear that what we are focusing on are the facts. We want the facts to be delivered to the citizens, and we are not censoring anyone's opinions. So what we want to achieve before the elections, but also in a long-term period, that there is sufficient fact-checking done not by activists, but by those who understand, who can work with the information and who can do the high-quality professional fact-checking. We want to strengthen media, because it's their job to work with information. We desperately need to increase the resilience of the society against disinformation, because the absorption capacity of disinformation, in the sense of believing sometimes incredible narratives, differs state by state. So we need to be much better in preparing the society for appearance of disinformation campaigns. I skipped the main thing. We as political leaders, as democratic politicians, we simply have to change the way we communicate. And we have to start counting with the almost certainty that disinformation will appear. So analyze the narratives from the past and prepare for delivering of facts and arguments to the people, especially before elections. A lot of things. This requires a very broad set of actions.
And you mentioned the Digital Services Act. I want to come back to that. But first, your remarks on censorship allegations here in the United States. We've seen a broad legal campaign of allegations that efforts to fight disinformation in the United States amount to censorship. And I'm just curious, coming from Europe, given the work you're doing, what do you make of those accusations here in the US and some of the litigation that we're seeing now even before the Supreme Court?
It's not only in the United States. I am mentioning it because I am now the happy woman sitting in Washington. But there is also a criticism in the EU, especially from the far-right political parties, which for a long time promote the idea of absolutely no absolute freedom of speech. They ignore the fact that already for decades we have some speech prohibited by the criminal laws. Yeah, so for me, the only way how to defend our position is to keep explaining this is not about opinions, this is about the facts, this is about delivering different sources so that the people can make a free choice. And I believe that after maybe short time we will see that our approach bears fruits, and that the people also themselves start thinking about whether it's a good thing to believe everything which comes their way through the digital means.
And I wanted to ask you, what politicians and policymakers are you meeting with while you're here in Washington?
Well, I met the representatives of the Department of State, Madame Elizabeth Allen, who is responsible for similar things. We spoke about security threats to elections, and I was impressed because we had 1 hour conversation, and her way of thinking is very similar to ours, that we need to take as broad as possible approach to the new era where disinformation and AI might have potential to destroy our democracy and democratic elections. So for me, it's important to hear the American colleagues and also to discuss whether we can do more together within the G7, for instance, or within some other international fora. We worked very well with the American partners on the AI Code of Conduct under G7. So the discussion with Madame Ellen and Mr. Rubin today was very, very interesting and very important. I will continue my tour tomorrow. I will also speak to Attorney General about a little bit different things, but it's important for me that when I come to United States that I see that similar problems are being tackled with similar methods, and that we are mentally fine-tuned to each other.
And I want to make sure we get a chance to bring in some questions from the audience. And so we have one question here from Mark. It says, should the US government do more to help the EU to push platforms to counter disinformation and foreign interference?
We might need help in many different ways, but which might be mutual, but not in this field, because after several years of hesitations whether to introduce legally binding rules to cover the digital platforms, we decided to do so. So now we have the Digital Services Act, we have the Digital Markets Act. We have to prove that we are able of reliable enforcement, which is mainly in the hands of the European Commission. So we are already launching the first procedures. We are asking the platforms about different things. The first platform which appeared in our radar was Platform X, former Twitter. Now we are running the procedure in case of TikTok, which is focusing on the protection of minors. So I would say that the EU is very determined to enforce fully the rules. And our rules are really revolutionary, because we tried really hard to introduce the rules which will not destroy the freedom of speech, but which will decrease the level of risks. And when you want to understand our way, you have to read the Digital Services Act, Digital Ads, Political Ads Regulation, plus Media Freedom Act and AI Act, because all these four should be, and I hope they are, consistent. And so I think that it is a European experiment which might inspire some others.
And on that point of enforcement, the EU elections have been called a stress test of the Digital Services Act. You just alluded to the investigations ongoing into X and to TikTok. Those have been taking months. I mean, if there are problems leading up to the election, can you as enforcers move quickly enough under the DSA in order to take action and bring penalties against the platforms?
No, we are doing, in fact, two things. We put to Article 35 of the Digital Services Act the obligation for the digital platforms to adopt the measures which will mitigate the risks before elections, without any further specification. And I think it was because we were asked by many, what do you mean by that? We issued guidelines to be used, or it's voluntary, so guidelines are just offered by the Commission to the digital platforms so that they know what we mean by taking the measures which will mitigate the risks. The second thing is that in the Digital Services Act, we have something what we call crisis protocol. This is some quick action. This is a quick action which should be taken by the platforms in case they are notified that there is something extremely dangerous coming. Example, some European leader announcing mobilization of the soldiers, and with the view of sending them to Ukraine, which would be deep fake. Just imagine Mr. Macron saying such things. I think that something like that might create panic and very inadequate reactions from the society. So this is just an example of what I understand as the threat which will require the trigger of this crisis protocol and rapid response. And digital companies have to employ sufficient staff, increase capacities to be able to follow what the law tells them to do.
And on that point, you just brought up this example of a deep fake. We have another audience question. How big of a threat is Russia to the digital information space?
For Russia, digital information space is the present from heaven. They have always been good in brainwashing. They invest billions in brainwashing their own people. The domestic propaganda works at full speed. But of course, they are also investing into the information war, which is targeted on European Union states, but also to Africa. They are influencing the information space in Latin America, in the Middle East. So for Russia, this is just part of their military doctrine, to lead this, to run this information war. We saw this already in 2014, after the invasion of Russia to Crimea. Our information space was overflooded with the messages covering or depicting, describing Ukrainians as the people who do not deserve to have their own state. And it was gradual, and they were investing, as I said, maybe billions in influencing the public opinion in the EU, and they were preparing the ground for full-scale invasion, which we saw in February 22. As a good surprise for me was that after the invasion, the data showed that the absorption of the Russian narratives went rapidly down, dramatically. We saw in our member states only about 3 to 5% of the people who were willing to believe, to listen and believe in the Russian narratives. Unfortunately, over time, this percentage grew up. But we are confronted with direct attack using words as weapons. That's why in the EU we decided to do many different things. Code of practice against disinformation being strengthened. We increased our capacities of the external service also in order to detect these foreign attacks. And we also took unprecedented decision to put on the sanctions list Russia Today, Sputnik, and some other so-called media, which are not media, but rather the Russian military arsenal. And we are also supporting the Russian journalists who are in exile in the EU, so that they can continue doing their job, and so that their texts and their ideas can be transferred to Russian territory.
As we get closer to the elections, though, are there certain narratives that you see particularly that Russia is seeding in the EU information space, or specific messages that you're trying to get out to EU voters in order to counter that?
My prediction is that there will be one narrative flying all over Europe, that the elections will be manipulated. This is what you saw in the United States as well. And then we will see different narratives in different member states based on the concrete situation and concrete also vulnerabilities of different societies. So while, I will give you an example, while in, for instance, Slovakia, most of the very dangerous campaigns, disinformation campaigns, are focusing on the war in Ukraine. When I go to Italy, it was more the Middle East conflict and Hamas-Israel conflict. So we see different strategy, different stories, different intensity. We have, for instance, Finland, where Russian propagandists know that they cannot so easily influence the public opinion because the society is quite resilient. So we don't see big effort in Finland. The same with the Baltic Sea countries. It's country by country. That's why I also now travel country by country before the elections, and I try to speak with those who organize the elections and who should also protect the legality and purity of the electoral campaigns. I'm asking them whether I can support somehow their efforts from the Central European level. So we do not underestimate those real threats.
And we only have a few minutes left, but as we're talking about EU elections, I want to ask you one of the forward-looking questions we have from the audience about our upcoming elections here in the United States. And this comes from Katie. She asks, is Europe ready for the second Trump presidency? Are you worried about the return of Mr. Trump?
I have never admitted that I am worried about something because it would become the truth. No, we are getting ready for continuation of the cooperation with the United States, whoever sits in the White House. In other words, we already experienced Mr. President Trump in his previous mandate. The experts say that now it'll be different. I would leave it for the politologists. We are getting ready for cooperation, and definitely some of the announcements of Donald Trump cause some kind of reactions on European level, because his pressure on European countries to increase the funding of defense, it was a proper one. Yes, we need to increase the budgets on defense at European level and member states level. But at the same time, we have to get ready for the possible situation that we will have to rely only on our defense. capacities. We are preparing for any alternative.
And we only have less than a minute left, but Trump himself has spread the narrative that the US election was stolen. Can you work with him and that administration on digital disinformation?
It depends on the American voters. If they will serve us, Mr. Trump, as the new president, we will have to work with him. It's the beauty of democracy, isn't it? But that's why we also have to make sure that the elections are fair and free, and that they are not manipulated or somehow damaged by some dirty hidden methods. So I think that this is all about the need to rely on robust electoral system, which the people will trust.
Got it. Well, unfortunately, that's all the time that we have. Thank you, Madam Vice President, for your time today and for answering these questions. Thank you all.